Hello, I'm Marcus Boston. Quick educational video today, and we are going to talk about a question that came up when I had a conversation recently with an individual who was calling us and had questions about their baby's brain injury at birth. And the question stems around, well, Marcus, how will the hospital or the doctors, how will they defend my baby's case? I think that it's pretty open and shut as to what happened, and I believe that the injury was preventable. So how are they going to defend the case? That's the question, and that's what we're going to deal with in today's educational video. How, in some instances, the defense, which is usually going to be the hospital or the doctors in a birth trauma case, how they will try to defend these cases. Now, before I get too deep into that, I want to help you understand when we're talking about bringing a birth injury or a birth trauma case, there are certain things that have to be proven. There are certain elements that we have to prove. And namely, those elements, what they do is they surround a concept called negligence. It's called negligence. And to prove these cases, we have to show that the treating doctor fell below the standard of care owed to, let's say your baby in this case, fell below the standard of care owed to your baby, causing the injury. That is how we have to prove these cases. And we use medical experts. We use medical experts to prove this. All right, so with that foundation there, you have an idea as to some of the big issues. Standard of care, there has to be a deviation from the standard of care causing the injury. And for today's video, I want to talk about that issue of causation or causing the injury. In a lot of these cases, what you will find is that how the defense will defend the case is they will attack causation. In a lot of cases, they will attack causation. And what they're essentially trying to say is that the injury was not caused by something that the doctors or the hospitals did, but it was something else that caused the injury. And in a lot of these cases, what I found is they will try to say that it was either an infection, there was an infection that caused the baby to have a brain injury, or they will say that the baby may have had, for example, a stroke in utero. Early in the process, they will allege that the baby had a stroke, or they will try to say that there was a genetic component, there was some type of genetic issue that caused the baby to have a brain injury, or there was some type of developmental problem with the baby, and that is what caused the baby to have a brain injury. So these are some of the ways in which, in these cases, the defense will try to defend the case. They will attack that element of causation, and that is how they will begin to mount a defense to say that what the doctors did is not what caused your baby to suffer a brain injury at birth, but it was something else that caused it. Now, how do we get around that, or how do we show that no, that is not what happened? Well, we have to do an investigation into the case. We have to take a look at other things. We have to take a look to see how will we combat the causation. Was there evidence of an infection? Was there evidence of an infection somewhere down the line? Or was there evidence that mom was having issues during her pregnancy? Was there anything like that? Was genetics an issue? Were there actually, genetic issues? So what we have to do is we have to look at these issues, and we have to review the case and see what do the facts show. For example, in a lot of these cases, what we find is that for some families, it was not necessarily infection. It was not necessarily genetics. It was not any of those things, developmental. But in some cases, what it can be is it will be that the child was in fetal distress, and at the hospital and the doctors and the nurses, they failed to diagnose, or they failed to see that fetal distress. And because they failed to do those things, they failed to treat the baby's fetal distress. And that fetal distress, a lot of instances, that can be due to, in some cases, a reduced level of blood and oxygen that's getting to the baby, which then leads to a brain injury. So the purpose of today's video is to help you understand from a medical legal standpoint some of the critical issues that are present in these cases, and how in some instances the doctors and the hospitals, how they will defend these cases. And it's important that a birth trauma attorney like myself, that we take the time to investigate. We take the time to look at those the fetal heart strips. We want to see what was on the strips. Were there late decelerations? Were there problems with variability? Did the strip actually show that the baby was in fetal distress? We want to know that. We want to take a look at mom's history. We want to see, did she have an uneventful pregnancy? Were there no problems during the pregnancy? We want to see, and we want to look at all of these things to be able to give you a good answer when we're doing an investigation as to what caused the baby's injury at birth. And was it something that could have been preventable? Was it something that the doctors and the nurses missed? Because in some instances, when there is fetal distress, and that fetal distress goes on for too long, as I said earlier, doctors, they have to do things to treat it. There are certain treatment options that they can give. There are some conservative things that they can do for mom. But if those conservative measures, if they are not working, and the baby is going on and on and on, and more help isn't given to the child, for example, an emergency C-section when warranted, if that's not done, then the child can suffer a brain injury. All right, so that's going to be it for today's quick educational video. Again, like I said, I was trying to give you an understanding of how these cases are defended in some instances, and that a bad result is not necessarily going to mean that medical malpractice occurred. We have to be able to look at all of these things. We have to be able to anticipate these defenses, and we have to look in the facts and in the record to see, are there ways to counter the defenses? If you have more questions, if you would like to speak to me about what's going on with your baby, maybe you're here because your child has an HIE, hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy diagnosis, or a CP diagnosis, or you're in that time period where your child is doing hypothermia cooling right now, you've got a lot of questions as to what's going on. If you have all of that happening, there is a telephone number down below. Go ahead and pick up the phone and give me a call. I talk with families all the time about these issues, like what we've talked about today, causation, which is a very important issue when we're talking about birth trauma cases. Fetal heart strips, we talked about that today. I talk with families all the time about these issues, and I'll be happy to take some time and listen to your story. One more thing, I want to make sure that you understand I practice law here in the state of Maryland. And if you contact me, because this video is on the internet, if you contact me and you're not in Maryland, you just got to understand that I have to use what we call co-counsel or local counsel, and that is an attorney in your state to help and push the case forward if this is something that we think that we can assist you with. All right. Again, I'm Marcus Boston, and I'm one of the childbirth injury and medical malpractice attorneys practicing law here in the state of Maryland at Boston Law Group LLC. And we will see you next time. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.